Donald Trump is angry now because he was forced to surrender. The news didn't come with fireworks. There was no formal surrender, no grand admission of failure. But behind the diplomatic language, a quiet truth echoed. Donald Trump blinked first. After years of trade threats, towering tariffs, and nationalist bravado, the United States has agreed to suspend its devastating tariffs on China for 90 days. This move, branded as a negotiation breakthrough, carries the unmistakable smell of retreat. And not just any retreat, one forced by economic pain, diplomatic pressure, and political embarrassment. Only days ago, Trump told the press that meetings had taken place with Chinese officials. But Beijing denied it. His administration claimed talks were underway. Chinese authorities said there were none. Yet, just as the contradiction began to swirl, a joint statement quietly emerged, not declaring victory but rather acknowledging a mutual pause in what had become a paralyzing economic standoff. The White House didn't wave the white flag, but it sure stopped firing. So what really happened? What forced the most protectionist U.S. president in modern history to ease off a trade war he once called easy to win? In this video, let's find out. Donald Trump's trade war strategy was never built on logic. It was built on bravado. Aimed at projecting strength to his base, the tariffs were pitched as punishment for China's unfair practices. But beneath the tough rhetoric was a far more fragile reality. Trump's gamble relied on the idea that the American economy was strong enough to absorb self-inflicted damage, while China's would crumble first. What he didn't count on was that the economic boomerang would hit his own side, fast and hard. By April, U.S. importers were in panic mode, scrambling to stockpile Chinese goods before the full 145% tariff hike took effect. Prices on everything from electronics to farm equipment shot up. Manufacturers who relied on Chinese parts faced production delays and rising costs. Small businesses without the buffer of billion-dollar margins were squeezed hardest. Consumers, too, began to feel the sting. Retail prices rose. Shelves sat emptier. Economic optimism cooled. Meanwhile, American ports, typically bustling with inbound containers, reported traffic plunging. Trade, the lifeblood of globalization, was choking. And as it did, the numbers began to show what Trump's speeches tried to hide. The U.S. GDP recorded its first quarterly contraction since 2022. Confidence dipped. Wall Street became uncertain. It wasn't a symbolic showdown anymore. It was an economic crisis in slow motion. And while Trump was betting that China would blink first, Beijing responded not with surrender but with strategic restraint. Instead of tit-for-tat theatrics, China deployed non-tariff retaliation. It restricted rare earth exports vital to the U.S. tech and defense sectors. It froze major aircraft deals with Boeing, hurting American manufacturing directly. Chinese trade envoys began deepening ties across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, isolating American companies through quiet, calculated diplomacy. Trump's tariff tantrum had backfired, and badly. But this breakdown in strategy leads to an even more bizarre twist, not in economics, but in the politics of perception. As markets convulsed and public pressure mounted, Trump reached for his favorite escape hatch: denial through performance. Standing beside Norway's Prime Minister at the White House, he declared that meetings with China had resumed, that progress was underway. But almost immediately, Beijing shattered that illusion. China's Ministry of Commerce issued a blunt statement: there are currently no trade negotiations taking place. The contradiction should have been a diplomatic embarrassment. But for Trump, it was a familiar tactic: say something happened, and dare anyone to prove otherwise. Still, the gap between reality and performance revealed something deeper. Trump wasn't holding the line. He was trying to save face. Behind the scenes, real negotiations were indeed underway, but not at the levels or terms he publicly claimed. What followed was a rushed announcement of a breakthrough, Not a comprehensive deal, but a 90-day suspension of mutual tariffs. It was a partial retreat disguised as progress. Trump needed a story to sell, and even an informal truce was a lifeline. Yet the structure of the deal tells its own story, one that exposes where the real leverage lies. At face value, the numbers look dramatic. The U.S. dropped its tariffs on Chinese imports from 145% to 30%, and China reduced its tariffs on American goods from 125% to 10%. These were not cosmetic shifts. They were substantial rollbacks that changed the terms of trade overnight. But while Trump framed the move as a mutual compromise, the substance reveals something else. China didn't make any sweeping concessions. There was no currency pledge, no forced technology transfer reversal, and no shift in industrial subsidies. Instead, China offered temporary relief on non-tariff barriers, like a pause on export bans, a suspension of rare earth restrictions, and vague promises of resumed aircraft purchases. The real concession came from Washington. Faced with economic contraction, political unrest, and business revolt, Trump blinked. The tariff rollback gave China exactly what it needed: resumed market access without surrendering economic policy. This wasn't just economic maneuvering. It was political damage control. Trump had boxed himself into a corner and needed a headline to break the tension. The 90-day suspension became a story of progress he could spin domestically, even if, in every practical way, it was China that walked away with the upper hand. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, and current affairs impacting your lives. The temporary nature of the agreement also reveals a shared anxiety. Both nations were hurting, and while neither wanted to fully concede, they needed to stop the bleeding. Thus, a pause was born, one that now shapes how markets and policymakers interpret the road ahead. Financial markets, starved for good news, latched onto the truce like oxygen. Wall Street surged. The Nasdaq jumped more than 3.5%, and tech stocks, long battered by the tariff blowback, rebounded with a vengeance. Asian markets echoed the rally. Europe's indices posted their strongest week since March. But optimism, while comforting, can also be deceptive. Beneath the mask lies a fragile understanding. This isn't peace. It's a ceasefire. A 90-day pause isn't an end to the trade war. It's a timeout. And in a world driven by geopolitical volatility, nothing about this pause is guaranteed to hold. More importantly, this brief window of market relief masks a deeper reality. The structure of global trade has already shifted. Many companies are rethinking supply chains. Some are moving operations out of China but not back to the U.S. Others are simply diversifying, hedging against the kind of policy shock that Trump's tariffs unleashed. In other words, the damage is already done. Trust, the invisible glue of international commerce, has eroded. And while the markets may celebrate a pause, investors are still watching closely for signs of relapse. In the aftermath of the tariff rollbacks, the question isn't just what was agreed upon, it's why it happened at all. For Donald Trump, the decision to suspend tariffs for 90 days was less a bold negotiation and more an unavoidable retreat, masked in the language of diplomacy. His trade war, once hailed as a crusade for American sovereignty, had morphed into a political liability. Prices were up, trust was down, and domestic pressure was mounting from both Wall Street and Main Street. The illusion of a strongman strategy had collapsed under the weight of economic data, and something had to give. Trump's shift in tone is telling. The firebrand who once bragged about punishing China for trade abuses is now calling for balance and mutual respect. That's not just rhetorical softening. It's a strategic recalibration. His prior tactics of isolation, escalation, and intimidation failed to deliver a comprehensive victory. They backfired. Instead of forcing Beijing to concede, they pushed China deeper into economic alliances with BRICS nations, strengthened its position across Asia, and gave it a clear diplomatic edge. This new 90-day truce, then, is not the beginning of victory. It's the acknowledgement of defeat, repackaged. Trump didn't shift his posture because he wanted to. He did it because the numbers left him no choice. Inflation was rising, manufacturing was contracting, farmers were pleading for stability, and in swing states where economic pain translates directly into political risk, the calls for relief grew too loud to ignore. On the other hand, China got what it needed most: access. Access to the US market, access to critical components, and most importantly, access to time to stabilize, regroup, and continue building its global economic influence while Washington flounders between trade tantrums and tactical retreats. So, what happens after 90 days? On paper, the goal is to use this window for constructive dialogue, to hash out a long-term trade agreement that addresses both sides' grievances. But history suggests caution. Trump's track record is erratic. China's approach is methodical. And neither side has forgotten how this trade war began or how unpredictable it became. If both nations can use this pause to craft a deal rooted in mutual economic benefit, it could mark the beginning of a new phase in the US-China relations, one less driven by bluster and more by pragmatism. But if the talks collapse again and the tariffs snap back into place, the fallout will be worse than before. Not just in numbers, but in credibility. Markets might absorb a tariff hike, but they won't easily forgive a second collapse in trust. The same goes for US allies, who watched the first phase of Trump's trade war with concern, and now view American trade policy as erratic and impulsive. A return to chaos will confirm their worst fears, that the US can no longer lead global trade with consistency, and that alternative alliances, perhaps even with China, offer more reliability than Washington does. That's what's truly at stake, not just steel prices or soybean exports, but the credibility of America's position in the global economic order. Now, no matter how Trump spins it, this isn't a victory lap. It's a climb down. A quiet one, done behind closed doors, announced with carefully crafted language, and immediately wrapped in patriotic messaging. But the reality is clear. Trump didn't win. He deferred. What do you think? Has Trump officially lost the trade war? Isn't it true that he surrendered before China even moved to using the most painful weapons it has against the United States? In the comment section below, share your thoughts on whether all this drama was needed when Trump had to make things normal and embarrass the United States. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring the latest news stories on geopolitics, economics, changing world order, and current affairs. Things you need to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.